When Officer Mark Johnson and his partner responded to a robbery call, he was shocked to find his son among the offenders. The teenager refused to talk, so the officer sought help from his squad to uncover the truth, revealing a disturbing secret about his son. Subscribe to the channel and click on the notification. Help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers. This way YouTube will deliver this content to more people who will benefit. I count on your help. After finishing their second patrol of the day, officers Mark Johnson and Alex Carter took a break for coffee and a bite to eat. The morning was unusually calm. Mark knew these rare moments should be cherished, but just as their coffee arrived, a call came through on the radio. The dispatcher requested that Mark and Alex head to a nearby address due to an alarm going off. Alex took a quick sip of coffee and made a frustrated face. "Here we go, another false alarm," joked Mark. Together, they drove to the scene. En route, they were informed that the situation was more serious than they had thought. An armed gang had invaded a store, taking customers and employees hostage. Reinforcements were on the way, but their patrol car was the closest to the location. This changed the officer's demeanor completely. The siren was activated, and Mark sped through traffic lights. 3 minutes later, the officers parked near the crime scene and approached the store carefully. They exchanged a brief look, and Alex asked if they should wait for backup, but Mark refused, deciding they couldn't wait any longer. The risk of losing hostages or the trail of the criminals was too high. Seconds later, the officers burst through the store door like a flash. "Everybody freeze. Drop your weapons," Mark shouted at the robbers, but there was no one armed inside. Some people were lying on the floor, terrified. Mark glanced toward the back of the store and saw one of the criminals trying to escape down a corridor. The officer chased after him while his partner Alex tended to hostages. The fleeing suspect appeared young and thin, hiding his face with a hoodie. The boy attempted to escape through a back window, but wasn't quick enough. Mark grabbed the suspect's arm and dragged him outside the store. The boy struggled, but the officer handled the situation with ease. He searched the youth for any weapons but found nothing threatening. Mark handcuffed the boy as Alex, his partner, approached with a knowing smile. "One less troublemaker on the streets, huh, buddy?" he said, moving to remove the hood from the suspect. "Come on, kid, take it off." Alex pulled back the hood and looked into the boy's eyes, but it was as if he had seen a ghost. Upon seeing the boy's face, Mark's expression also shifted from surprise to terror instantly. The criminal was Jake Johnson. "Son, what are you doing here?" Mark shouted, desperate. Unmasked, Jake stammered apologies and tried to explain he didn't want to do it but had no choice. Mark was completely stunned and embarrassed, especially because Alex, his partner, had witnessed everything. Alex approached and tried to console his friend, urging him to calm down. "Look, Mark, I've called off the reinforcements. This gives us time to decide what to do here, okay?" he said. "Take it easy. He's your son. Don't do anything rash." But Mark didn't want to hear any of it. His own son had tried to rob a store full of innocent workers. Mark asked Jake if his mother knew about this, but the boy begged his father to let him go and not tell her anything. He repeated that he had no choice but was interrupted firmly by his father. "There's always a choice besides crime, kid. You should know that better than anyone," Mark shouted, nearly lunging at his handcuffed son. Alex intervened to prevent Mark from losing his temper and worsening the situation. They had to decide quickly what to do. Throughout his career, Mark had always been relentless and had never let a criminal escape, and letting Jake go now would be a grave failure in his character and role as an officer. The officer recalled when Jake was 10, and they played together. On that occasion, the boy asked, "Dad, if I do something wrong, will you arrest me too?" At the time, the officer thought the question was just a child's curiosity. He never imagined his son could follow such a dirty and dishonest path as crime. So Mark laughed and told his son he knew he would be a good person and never set foot in a police station. Now, faced with the facts, the father's blood boiled, clouding his thoughts. "We're taking him to the station," Mark shouted, nervous, wiping the tears that welled up in his eyes. "He'll only be released when he explains why he was here as a damn thief." Alex couldn't believe it. Was he really going to arrest his own son? Alex tried to protest, but it was in vain. Mark was already dragging his son toward the patrol car. Jake was placed in the back seat, and they drove to the station, as they always did with other robbers. As a father, Mark Johnson was not comfortable at all. It was painful to see his son thrown into a cell. However, what bothered the man most was the question, Why did Jake commit that crime? He received an allowance and had all his expenses covered. Even during times of economic crisis, Mark and Laura, his wife, never let their son lack anything. What led him to participate in a robbery? Are you serious? You're going to leave your own son here all night? Alex asked before ending his shift. Mark then lowered his head, ashamed and confused, but aware that he couldn't let his son's wrongdoing go unpunished. If I go easy on the boy, what moral will I have when keeping someone else's child locked up? Do you think that's fair? He's spending the night here. It's my final decision, said the bitter father, bidding his partner farewell and indicating they would meet again the next day. After changing, the man drove home in his car, troubled by everything that had happened. He hadn't yet thought about how he would tell his wife. How would she react upon learning their son had committed a crime and her husband was responsible for the arrest? At a certain point on the road, Mark encountered an accident blocking the way ahead, forcing him to stop. Sitting in his car, unable to move forward for several minutes, he let his mind wander. He saw the emergency lights of the approaching ambulance, which reminded him of an incident from his adolescence. Mark and some friends used to climb onto a bridge and throw pebbles at passing cars below. It was supposed to be just a harmless prank by bored youths in a small town, but one day the situation got out of hand. Mark, who was only 13 at the time, showed off by throwing a larger stone than usual. The stone shattered the windshield of a passing car and injured the driver, who lost control and crashed the vehicle. The accident caused a massive traffic jam, blocking the entry and exit of cars and trucks for several hours. Frightened, the boys ran to hide in a grove, staying there until everything calmed down. Despite the car damage, the woman's injury wasn't severe, and no one was held responsible for what happened. When Mark finally returned home hours later, a police car was parked at his door, and his parents were talking to an officer investigating the incident with the parents of all the neighborhood children. Before the boy could say anything incriminating, his mother asked, "How is your cousin's house? Is he better from the fever?" The teenage Mark nodded and went up to his room. Minutes after the patrol car left, his father appeared in his room with a belt in hand. The officer suspected nothing, but the boy's parents knew exactly the type of child they had. They just never imagined he could hurt an innocent person. That was the worst memory of his childhood, but it was the same one that completely changed his mindset and made him dream of becoming a police officer one day. Old times, Mark said to himself in the car when traffic finally moved. Now it was his turn to teach his son a lesson, but unlike his father, without using violence. He would show that actions have consequences using only the law. With this in mind, he finally found a way to talk to his wife about what had happened. When Mark arrived home, his wife immediately asked if Jake had called, as their son had left early and hadn't returned yet. With no choice, the officer had to tell the truth, even knowing it would devastate his wife. He explained as carefully as possible that he had arrested Jake for robbing a store and that he wouldn't be coming home that night. Laura had to sit on the couch and control her breathing to avoid fainting. Shocked, she didn't know what to say or how to handle the news. She asked what had happened, as she couldn't believe her son had done something so terrible. What reasons could he have for this? Mark said the boy was caught in the act, and he followed police protocol. Laura didn't accept that her son was in jail and began to cry. She argued with her husband, asking why he hadn't talked to her first, that they might have found a better solution. "I wasn't alone at the time of the arrest. And besides, you know me. Law is law, darling. For everyone, including Jake, our son," Mark said, his eyes welling up. He tried to be strong but felt shaken by the situation. Had he failed as a father? Laura shouted at her husband and demanded he fix it. The man was tired and decided not to talk about the subject anymore. He refused the food Laura had prepared and went to shower. When he tried to sleep, he couldn't relax at all. When he closed his eyes, he saw his wife and his professional partner as two ghosts in front of him, suggesting he could have resolved things or handled the matter better. Mark gave up trying to sleep. He got up and went to Jake's room, trying to understand why his son had acted that way. He searched the room for answers but found nothing in the closet or under the bed. However, when he looked in one of the nightstand drawers, he found a notebook. A small piece of paper fell out and touched the floor. Mark picked it up and read the message, "Nathan, $600. The officer turned the paper over, but there was nothing else written on it. What was this? Who was Nathan? The next day, Officer Mark Johnson visited Chris, Jake's best friend, to ask about the mysterious name in his son's notebook. The officer noticed the boy became very anxious after hearing Nathan's name but denied knowing anything. Mark looked seriously at the boy and said, "It's better you tell me what my son has been up to. He's in the station's jail. Do you want to be seen as an accomplice to the crime?" Chris swallowed hard and came clean. "Jake would never do something like this, Mr. Johnson." He was forced by Nathan," the boy said. Mark pressed Chris again. "Spit it out, come on." Then the boy confessed he knew Nathan and how everything happened. Jake and Chris had gone out with some friends. They had taken one of the boy's mom's car without her knowing and were just driving around town aimlessly for fun. None of them had much driving experience, but when it was Jake's turn, he wanted to show off and sped up, losing control on a curve and hitting another parked vehicle. They were in an area full of old trailers, and the car they hit was old but had its side dented and windows broken. The bigger problem was that the car belonged to Nathan, a 22-year-old drug dealer who lived there. Nathan heard the crash and immediately confronted the boys. He pulled Jake out of the car and demanded $600 for the car damage immediately. Jake said he didn't have the money and tried to explain but ended up getting punched by Nathan. Gritting his teeth, the dealer warned that he would get the money any way he could, even if it meant stealing, or he would pay for the car damage with his own life. The story turned the officer's stomach. His son had made a mistake, but he had been assaulted and threatened first. When Mark left Chris's house, he called his partner Alex and said, "Hey, want to help me find a man?" He was last seen in the old trailer area. Upon arriving at the location, the officers saw a young man getting out of a car with a dented side and broken window. He was carrying a backpack. Alex, already walking towards the young man, asked from a distance if his name was Nathan. Upon hearing his name and seeing two officers approaching, the young delinquent ran, jumping over a house's wall. Mark and Alex split up and began chasing the criminal, surrounding the block. It didn't take long for Mark and Alex to corner him. With no way to escape, Nathan took off his backpack and threw it towards the officers, claiming nothing there was his and that he was just doing a favor for a friend. When Mark opened the backpack, he found drugs, a wad of cash, and a pistol. Mark stood up and immediately arrested Nathan, handcuffing him. The officer added that Nathan had messed with the wrong teenager, his son Jake, who had been forced by him to participate in the robbery. In a mocking tone, Nathan said that Jake was just paying for his actions. "It's the natural law of life, buddy. Cause and consequence. Your son got what he deserved," Nathan said. Mark's blood boiled, but Alex didn't allow him to do anything rash and alone escorted the delinquent to the patrol car. A few days after Nathan's arrest, Jake had his hearing with the judge. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, but at least this time, Mark wouldn't have to testify against his son, but in favor of his innocence and freedom. Mark Johnson showed the store's surveillance video that recorded the robbery, showing his son cornered and frightened in a corner of the store during the criminal's actions. The officer knew it wouldn't erase his son's involvement in a crime, but he hoped the judge would understand that the young man had been coerced. When Mark motioned to stop the video, the judge asked him to let it play longer. It was then that everyone could see the officer's impartial conduct, handcuffing his own son while wiping away tears. Before delivering his verdict, the judge invited the defendant to speak. The boy then admitted to participating in the robbery, but because he feared for his life and the lives of his friends. He acknowledged the mistake he made and knew he could have told his father everything, but he didn't want to worry him or make him a target for dealers too. After all, his father already dealt with criminals every day. Now, after facing real danger, Jake realized the importance of the role his father played in society and felt ashamed for not being clear with him from the beginning and disappointing him and his mother. "I'm very proud of my dad, and I hope he's proud of me someday too." Subscribe to the channel and click on the notification. Help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers. This way YouTube will deliver this content to more people who will benefit. I count on your help. In silence, Mark couldn't contain his emotion and let a tear escape. He knew at that moment that all the education he had given his son had been worth it. Pleased with the boy's words and Officer Mark's conduct, the judge ruled that Jake had been a victim and was therefore innocent. He wouldn't need to serve any sentence and had been aggressively coerced into doing what he did. However, since Jake had indeed participated in an infraction, he was required to do community service for 3 months. And that was the entire sentence. Leaving the courthouse, Mark and Jake hugged like they hadn't in a long time. A hug that young Mark had longed for and his father had never been able to give, but he wouldn't make the same mistake by being too strict with his son. "I love you, kid," he said. "Now let's go home. Your mom has dinner ready." If you enjoyed the story, please leave a like, and this other video appearing on the screen now will probably move you too. Enjoy and see you in the next video.